Aloha, I'm Kristine Altwies, and this is It's All About the Keiki. Today I have a really exciting guest. I'm very excited to introduce to you Eric Johnson, who's the Artistic Director at Honolulu Theatre for Youth. Welcome.
Thank you so much. It's wonderful to be here.
Thanks for being here. So one of the reasons I wanted to have you on, there were many. I'm a big fan of HTY, Honolulu Theatre for Youth. And I just know that as a mom, when I take my kids to see one of your productions, they're going to come away changed and improved and happier, and they just are enriched so much by it. So I wanted to have you on to have you explain to our audience what goes into a show and why theater for kids.
Well, thank you. Thank you. It's great to be here. I think, one of the things I'll start with is I think that theater and the arts in general are just a natural extension of the creative and imaginative life of all children. Mm-hmm. And it used to be that theater was considered mainly an adult affair. Mm-hmm. And then as it's crept down and entered younger and younger ages, and now we create theater starting at 2. We have theater programs that start really young and go all the way up. I think what we're trying to do with our programming is engage young people in a world that feels very natural to them. Mm-hmm. So a 2-year-old and a 3-year-old is very interested in play. They're interested in relationships, and one of the things that theater does so beautifully is that it builds empathy, because it's a safe place to imagine yourself as someone else or to watch people interacting. So a 3-year-old would see people interacting in ways that are meaningful to them. And then, all the way up through high school, we do a lot of work with sexual violence prevention, actually. And so if you think about a high school student, how personal that material can be, and the fact that they get to sit in a safe place and watch something play out and then discuss that thing that is fiction, mm-hmm. In a very real subject. I think then that can be meaningful, and in that way we hope to offer a whole scope of activities and encounters along the way, mm-hmm. that are meaningful to young people wherever they are.
And one of the things about HTY, in addition to, I think, hitting the mark every time with meaningful work for kids, is that every adult that goes to an HTY show, and I sit in the audience and I look mm-hmm. around, so I'm speaking from a place of authority, every adult in there comes along with you. And I feel like the theater that you produce is just as meaningful to the adults. Whether they're there with a child or they're with an adult friend, they seem to be pulled along. So is that intentional as you put together the works, that it can sort of speak to two very different audiences?
I think so, and there is a way I like to think about that, which is that we may not share many experiences, but in this, the adults have been 7, they have been 3. So for an adult sitting in a play that is specifically speaking to that moment, I try to create work that doesn't divide the experience. There's a lot of especially I would say, films or cartoons that work, that they have like the wink adult humor, mm-hmm. and then the children's experience. Mm-hmm. And so we try not to have an adult show and a child's show going on simultaneously, but to really bring the adult authentically into a place where they're sharing a story in common with a young person.
Can you give an example?
Yeah, I think I can. Well, we were just chatting about Blue, which is a preschool show that we did where young people, these 2 characters live in an all blue world, mm-hmm. and color starts invading. Red things start popping up in the blue world, and they're left with a dilemma of like, what in the world do we do with these red things? And I think that the simplicity of that story is very understandable to someone who's 3 years old. And if you think about what they're going through in the developmentally, they're dealing with new things all the time popping up into their world, and mm-hmm. like, oh my gosh, I only eat these certain things, but this new food is coming in. And so that's very tangible. And the adult may be thinking about prejudice, they may be thinking about multiculturalism, they may be thinking about their own family dynamics or relationships, yet it's still going back to a truth that they have been wrestling with since they were 3, which is this idea of difference. And so that might be a way that artistically we bring the 3-year-old and the adult into a room together, and they can sit and enjoy this story in the same breath.
And I just want to say here, for people watching who haven't seen an HTY show or who don't know what it is or what it's about, it's our only professional theater in Hawaii. The actors are adults, they're paid professionals. Sometimes they act like children, sometimes they take on roles of children, but they are adults. And it's award-winning.
Yeah, we have found that that our work has grown much more about Hawaii. And strangely, as we start telling more and more local stories, we're getting a lot of interest on the mainland and internationally, and we're being able to take our programs out. But we were one of the first children's theaters, professional children's theaters in the country, and it's a great honor to kind of be continuing that work. I think just to give an idea for those people who haven't been to an HTY experience before, sort of the scope of our organization is we reach around 120,000 young people and families and teachers every single year. And that's not just here on Oahu, but we go on a tour of all of the neighbor islands every single year with multiple productions aimed at multiple age groups. So we really are a statewide organization. And I think something that families miss often, because they sign permission slips and they know their kids go with school, is that whereas a school may have the resources to go to 1, maybe 2 class trips during the course of a year, we're actually producing 6 to 9 professional fully mounted productions during the course of that year. So we hope that a lot of families who might enjoy it as part of their school day will also come back and see it as a family, and they can see many more productions. They can enjoy, the diversity of kind of work that we've had over the years.
And they can have an experience, and as one of my guests recently just said, make a memory as a family, right? So I guess what you're saying is, if your kid has seen the show on a school trip, don't take that as the final answer. Say, let's go back and see it again, because you do have shows on the weekends.
We do.
Most weekends.
Most weekends at Tenney Theatre, which is on the grounds of St. Andrew's Cathedral. And it's a very small, intimate 300-seat theater, so it's a great place for young people.
No bad seats in the house.
No bad seats in the house. And we hope that people will take that experience into their families. And I think I have never heard a complaint that a child has gone to see it with their class and just does not want to see it again. Usually, even if they have seen it with their class, they're happy to come back and be the expert and introduce their parent to the play.
Right.
And
you were doing something recently, and I don't know if you're still doing it, but you were doing low stim versions of some of your shows. Can you talk about that a little bit? Is that still going on?
It is still going on, very much so. So that is, while we can't serve absolutely every special needs person as well as we would like to, we do make a huge effort in doing the things that will appeal to a great variety of people. And so what we have done is we've taken a certain performance on the Saturdays, and we leave on a little bit of light, and we undersell the show so there's plenty of room to move around, and we take out any sort of startling or surprising noises. We take them down a little bit, and any kind of flashes or very stimulating, sort of moments, we dial that back just a little bit. And I think that makes it available not just for people on the autism spectrum, which we have many families who appreciate that, but also for younger kids who may be a little skittish. And there are as many kinds of theater goers as there are children. with the variety of work that we produce, you sometimes get people who are attracted to a certain piece or another piece, and to be able to give a circumstance where people on the autism spectrum or people who just happen to be really affected by loud noises can come and kind of tone it down is a great way of building our service.
Yeah, and you get more people in the door, and I think there are some people who want to take their kids to things but don't have the opportunities, so it's lovely. One of the things I really appreciate about HTY is that it is often more quiet and contemplative, and I love watching my children follow the story as we're sitting there, and you can see their brains working, and you can see their hearts pumping, and you can see them engaging in a way, or shuddering when something happens on stage, tearing up all the time, even in some of the happy shows. They're so emotional about some of the stuff that goes on, and I think in today's world with so much fast, loud, crazy stuff happening all the time, to go and sit in a live performance and experience that art in front of them is so important. And then to do that as a family, brings you closer. So with that in mind, can you speak a little bit about why live theater maybe is more important than watching a movie? It is, not something maybe that people would do if they have a live movie option. They might say, why should I go to the theater? Why should I go to the theater when I can go to the movie? So can you talk about the importance of living art, maybe?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So I will start with the most unlikely of reasons, which is if you go see a live theater performance as a family versus at HTY, it's actually less expensive than going to the movie and getting popcorn and the movie prices and those sorts of things. And part of that is we're a nonprofit and we're able to keep our costs really low and affordable for families. So people don't think of that. You think of theater prices. I mean, certainly if you go to see Wicked, it's going to run you $80, but that's not the case with HTY. And actually, that time together is there. But I think the importance goes well beyond that, which is that being in a room with actual physical people and watching them, and often what happens in HTY shows is an actor will play 2 or 3 roles in a particular production. And I feel like that seeing that live, where imagination has to fill in the car crashes and the details and those experiences, and to see a person change themselves and put on another person gives the feeling that possibilities are endless and that I can be anything I want to be, and that our circumstance are intertwined with our creativity. And so if we can imagine different realities on the stage, I think it really helps us imagine different realities in our lives. And the research plays that out. Recently there was a study that put monitors on people in a live theater performance and in a movie, and they found that in the live performance that actually the heart rate is affected in a way, the heart rate and the bio rhythms are affected in a way that's much more intense than seeing a piece of media where there is that distance.
Which is crazy when you think about how overstimulating movies can be with the sounds and the lights and the special effects and the drama, as opposed to even if you put your biggest budget on the stage, you're still going to get much less stimulation, yet it affects people on a more intense level. That's fascinating.
It does. And I think that person to person, there's an ability that just is unparalleled. We have always, there are societies with all kinds of different art, but as far as I know, they've never found a society that doesn't have some form of standing up in front of each other and telling stories and sharing that person to person. So I think it's basic. It's basic to our human nature.
What would you say to parents who have kids who are very STEM oriented? So, you know, my kid doesn't enjoy the arts because my kid is all about technology or all about programming or all about sports or whatever it is. I think some parents sort of pigeonhole their kids into the art zone or the science and technology zone.
Yeah, I think what I would say is that I think it is important for a parent to follow the passion of their child. But I think if you think that there's not science and rigor in arts, or if you think there's not creativity and story and expression in science, you're mistaken. That those two things are very beautifully matched. And so I think especially for a young person to be able to at least expose them and give them skills on one side or the other that will allow them to integrate their knowledge and become better rounded individuals would be silly. So, you know, I certainly would never advocate that, you know, that someone only go to the theater and never go to a science class. And I think doing the reverse would be equally as foolish.
So well-rounded. And I guess what I'm wondering is for a parent who believes their child isn't interested in the arts, you know, I would say drag them to an HTY show, even kicking and screaming, because once they get in and they start experiencing it, chances are their mind is going to be expanded and they'll become a fan.
I think so.
Yeah. I mean, maybe we're a little biased, but
yeah, we both came from theater backgrounds. That does probably bias us a little bit. But I also think that one of the things that HTY does so beautifully is that theater in some ways is perfectly scaled for Hawaii. That we have the ability here, because all of our company is from here and lives here and is part of the community, that it's a two-way conversation. Whereas, you know, a movie that's filmed in New York may be a wonderful movie, but may have nothing to do with the life of someone growing up here in Hawaii. And so one of the things that where we do have an advantage at HTY is that we can really speak specifically to the experiences of people that are here. You know, our actors look like the people that surround them. We tell local stories. We tell stories using Hawaiian culture and using this, talking about the science of, right now we're working on a science of energy piece that is very specific to what the energy conversation is right here, right now. And so I think theater in that way can pull adult conversations and bring them down and include young people in those conversations.
And I want to note that with that in mind, we've said that the actors are local and you're talking about these local stories, but really the shows are written almost always by local playwrights.
Yes.
And some of the musicals that you've produced have been amazing. We buy the CDs, we listen to them in the car, the kids sing the songs. The production value is so high, the quality of the writing, you wouldn't, I mean, I don't know if people think local means rinky-dink or less impressive. I certainly don't, but in HTY it manifests as the highest quality, intelligent writing, great music.
Yeah, we're super blessed. I think because a lot of our artists are just, want to be in this community, but many of them either have had careers on the mainland and could, make it anywhere as a professional, or are, young people who are launching careers that will then, go off and do other things. But right now, we've been able to build this community of artists that are creating their own work and are really, I think, doing quality work.
Right. It's worth checking out for sure. So we are actually in the final few minutes. We've got about 6 minutes left, and I know there's a lot more to talk about, including what people might be able to look forward to.
Yeah. Well, I'll just give some highlights of what's coming up in this coming year, because we're in the summer and about to launch into the next season. And some special projects. We're doing a Filipino piece, which we haven't explored that culture in a while, and we're super excited to. It features not only stories, traditional stories, and folk tales, but dancing and music and a lot of things that we just maybe people haven't been exposed to in that culture. We're also doing a piece for military families about the experience of being a military child, and I think that is a really unique experience and one that we see all around us here in Hawaii, but maybe don't understand as well as we should. Just what those kids have given up moving so many times and having parents, in the military forces and the kind of bravery that brings on those stories. So that's a piece that is coming up this coming season. We're doing a preschool piece about gender. We're doing another preschool piece about trash and treasures. So, it runs the gamut. There's a couple of musicals that are coming up this coming year, and I think there will be something for everybody, and for those families that do want to commit and make a full year-long season of adventures. I think it'll be a fun way to spend some Saturdays.
It's the greatest way to do it is get the season subscription, because then you're plugged in for the year. You don't have to worry about getting your tickets every, put in a tickler reminder to yourself and then forget about it. You just do it at the beginning of the year and then you've got the whole season. I just want to say, when you talk about musicals, I've never been a fan of a musical, but I am a fan of every HTY musical, including my two favorites, Korean Cinderella and the Bollywood Robin Hood.
Yeah.
The genius in those shows, I still smile when I think about them. So there will be some musicals coming up.
Yes.
In the next season. Good.
Yes, there will.
And I know you also have a backstage workshop option for some kids. Can you talk about that just a little bit?
Yeah, I'd love to. Well, we have a whole bunch of education options. We have, Saturday classes. We have workshops. We've got all kinds of things. But one of the things we do is an onstage workshop, which is a 1 day, 1 hour kind of introduction to backstage and how it's with the creative team that put together the show. So you learn about how they put together the show and all of the fun things that go into that particular show. And you get to tour around and see the costumes and play with the props and do a little bit of acting, all packed into an hour.
Right before the show, so then you get to see that's great.
Yeah.
And it gives the kids some insight into the amount of work that goes into putting on a show and actually seeing the backstage. And I know in some of the shows there have been sort of magical tricks that you've done, and so they get to see how those tricks work. And
I think that just enhances the experience, because I think our creative life is in service of their creative life. So when I think about what I ultimately am doing, I'm hoping that I am inspiring theater that is way better than anything I can imagine creating myself, and that those young people that are seeing our work are going to grow up and tell those stories in ways I just can't even imagine.
I think that's where it starts. I was listening the other day to NPR, and there was a director who's about to get an Academy Award, or so we think, and she was talking about her earliest memories watching movies with her father and how the seeds were planted back then. And, who knew at that point that she was watching things that would ferment in her brain and trickle into sort of exciting explosions later. But yeah, it starts very early. Okay, we've got a few minutes left, and I want your final thoughts of sort of the importance of arts in a child's life, maybe talking to parents, giving them some ideas. Many parents get overwhelmed when they hear about things they should be doing that they're maybe not doing. So just a couple simple pointers for parents who want to include the arts in their children's lives.
Yeah, well, I think you said it. It's planting seeds. And so I think the most important thing is to go out and try out some experiences. And it doesn't have to be HTY, but I think experiences where a child is the center of that experience, and then not being afraid not to be an expert on the arts, but recognizing that so much of arts is about participating, not just, and that could be watching and seeing a show, but participating in the experience. So how do you talk about it, in the car ride home? What is, a play that you laugh and there becomes a little family joke from that, that piece? How does a dress-up game at home relate to something you've watched on stage. And so I think that the parent and the family can make this a rich part of their ongoing life and creative life together.
I like that. Don't be the expert. That seems like a good rule of thumb for parents in that situation, for sure.
I have a 2.5-year-old, and I learn theater from him every single day. And you know, sometimes he comes to see shows and you know, gives me a good scolding about how talky it is. So you know, we're constantly learning.
That's good. Children as teachers. I love it. Okay, well, thank you for being here. I'm so excited for next season, and I hope our audience takes up the initiative and comes to HTY. They can find you on the web at htyweb.org.
Very good.
Thank you. And the shows are conveniently located in the heart of downtown. Parking is free. On Saturdays, the shows are easy to get to because there's not a lot of traffic. Great family thing to do. Go have dinner in Chinatown afterwards. I'm saying all your bits.
Those are great. That's great. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for being here, Eric.
And thank you for making HTY a part of your life.
Oh, we love it so much. This has been It's All About the Keiki. I'm Kristine Altwies. Very big thanks to my special guest, Eric Johnson, to our hosts here at Alelo Communications, to our director, Patrick Taylor, Taylor Patrick. Until next time, aloha.